Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome to today's web conference. This is Fast Track Dynamics 365 for Finance and Operations Tech Talk. Today's topic, GST and GTE Part 2, Global Tax Engine. My name is Janice and I'm going to be your moderator today. We are broadcasting this web conference through Teams live events and the audio can be heard through your PC speakers. Today's web conference is being recorded on behalf of the Microsoft Corporation. Participation in the meeting today indicates your consent to being included in the meeting recording. Attendees may access the web conference recording via the same registration link that was used to attend today's live broadcast. If you have questions for the presenters or need support, you can turn on the Q&A panel by selecting the question mark icon located in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. We do have presenters standing by to respond to your questions throughout the session. Now, on to the presentation. Presenting for us today from Microsoft, we have Senior PM Lead, Richard Luan, and supporting Richard on Q&A is Pravat Bhargava, who is a Senior Program Manager. So without any further delay, Richard, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Okay, thank you. So in today's session, I'm going to introduce you the background, the design of the new tax engine. So this tax engine was introduced into Indian market on 7.3, and we build our GST solution on top of this engine. So we will start from the overview, and then I will try to compare the new engine with an old tax engine, and then we will walk through the data flow, and finally I will do some mini demo. Because on this Friday, there was another session for me to demo some extension scenario based on the request in Indian market. So talking about the GTE, basically we bring three main points, the benefit to our customer. The first one is automatically tax applicability. So if you are familiar with the old tax engine, there's still a lot of manual work for the user who entering the sales document to select or pick up the correct tax code. But in our new GTE, it is possible that for the user who enter sales document or purchase document, he don't need to worry about what is the correct tax type, what is the correct tax rate. He just enter the transaction directly. Don't need to worry about what is the taxability logic. And it's fully configurable. So that means if you want to change, for example, take applicability as example. In India, if it's an intra-state transaction, then it is CGST plus SGST will be applicable. And for interstate transaction, then it is IGST be applicable. And there's a lot of flexibility there. And if you think that the applicability rule is not suitable for your business, you can easily configure the applicability rule by changing the configuration without any code change. So that is the configurability I'm talking about now. And also such configurability available for tax calculation, posting, and settlements. And since we maintain all the logic in the configuration file, which is actually an XML file, so it is easier for partner or customer to deploy the configuration into the environment and even share with other customer or partner. And in the below of the slides, from functional perspective, it covers 4 functional pillars: tax applicability, and tax calculation. Tax calculation means how the tax should be calculated per different tax type, like customer duty, GST, withholding tax, TDS, and we have tax accounting. Tax accounting means how you want to post the tax. For example, for purchase transaction, whether you want to debit the tax to the tax recoverable account or expense account or probably inventory account or fixed asset acquisition account. So there is a flexibility there. So such logic is also configurable. And the last point is tax settlement. So in India, we have some flexibility to settle, to do some cross-tax component settlement. So we have CGST, we have SGST, we have IGST. So you can settle between, you can do the tax settlement between CGST and IGST. So it's not just you do the settlement within one tax component. So such logic can also be configurable in our configuration. So yes, so for GTE, we handle this 4 functional area, and we provide these 3 benefits, key benefits to the market. So next part is for your easier understanding of the new tax engine. I'm trying to compare the old tax engine. I mean the sales tax group, item tax group, sales tax code. This concept with the GTE in the 3 functional area. I mean applicability, calculation, posting. So the first part is tax applicability. So on the left side of the slide, it is old tax engine. As you might be familiar with the design, we have sales tax group, we have item sales tax group. So you maintain several tax code in these 2 groups, and then you assign the sales tax group to customer, vendor, or account, and then you can also assign item sales tax group to item master or procurement category, sales tax category. So when you create a sales transaction or purchase transaction, you have customer, you have item, then it system will default the sales tax group, item sales tax group, and the intersection will be the sales tax code, which is applicable for this transaction. But still, it's a limited automation. Sometimes you need a more flexible applicability rule, which cannot be satisfied by this limited applicability logic with old tax engine. So that's resulting, sometimes users still need to manually change the sales tax group or item sales tax group, so to make sure that the correct sales tax code will be applied for this transaction. And if you check the right side of GTE, it is a fully configurable and automated process. So on the top, there is it is a high-level flowchart for GTE to determine what is the applicable tax type and tax component. So when you call GTE to calculate the tax, we have a concept called tax type. So system will check whether the tax type is applicable for this certain transaction. If the tax type is applicable, for example, GST is applicable, and GST is the tax type. And under GST tax type, we have CGST, SGST, IGST. So system will decide, is CGST applicable for this transaction? If CGST is applicable, system will do the same thing for other tax component under the same tax type, and then system will check whether SGST is applicable for this transaction, and do the same for IGST, and finally system will return the applicable tax type together with the tax component. So probably for an intrastate transaction, system will return GST as a tax type together with CGST and SGST as a tax component. So the key point here is there are applicability rule on top of the tax type and the tax component. System will start the logic from the tax type and then to the tax component. And internally, system will do the applicability check for both tax type and tax component like this. So firstly, if suppose that I'm checking the applicability logic, applicability rule for GST, it will first check the condition you defined in the GST tax type to check whether such condition is satisfied. If it is satisfied, it will further check the lookups, the type of lookup. If the type of lookup is configuration, so system will first further check whether the lookup you define in the configuration is satisfied. If yes, okay, then this type is applicable. If not, of course, it's not applicable. And there's possibility that you define the lookup, the source type is user data. Then you need system will check the lookup you define in the tax setup. So from business perspective, for example, to determine whether it's CGST plus SGST or IGST, it can be kind of hard-coded. So that means if it is intrastate, then it's CGST plus SGST. If it's interstate, it is IGST. So such logic can be maintained inside of the configuration. So in this box, so you can define the logic either in the condition or you define the lookup as a source type as configuration. But there are some situation like we have SAS in India, and whether SAS is applicable, it is determined by the item you sell. An item, is defined in the FinOps. So you cannot do such configuration to do such setup within the configuration. You should deploy the configuration into the FinOps and use the data you define in the FinOps to determine whether SAS is applicable or not. So that's the reason you have to, in the configuration, you should define the lookup as the source type is user data, and then you maintain the lookup condition in the text setup. Okay, so it looks a little bit complex, but I will go to the system to show you how it is implemented. But of course, later on you can refer back to this slides to compile the logic in the system. And here I highlight here for both condition and lookup, this part is configurable. So that's a benefit we can bring with GTE. Originally, all this logic is kind of hard-coded. You cannot change it. But for GTE, you can change the condition, you can change the lookup condition, which can give you much more flexibility. And here is the tax calculation. So in old tax engine, obviously you cannot configure anything. All the calculation logic is hard-coded in X++. In case you want to change the calculation logic, you have to change the X++. But in GTE, you can maintain the tax calculation formula under the tax component. So it's fully configurable. You can change the calculation logic in whatever way you like. So here is just a screenshot. You can see how the tax is calculated for CGST. We have several components. We have formula. Several formula. We have formula to calculate the base amount. Then we have formula to calculate tax amount, and then we have load on inventory amount, non-business usage amount, recoverable amount. So lot of tax amount, or we call it tax measure, for you to do the tax posting. And later is tax posting. The last part is tax posting. So still, for posting logic, it's also hard-coded. Yeah, so this one is tax posting. Actually, I have two parts. This part is about accounts, because when we talk about posting, firstly, you need to know what kind of account you can post the tax amount. So in this slides, I just want to say that for the account, it is limited account. So if you open the VAT, this ledger posting group, you can see there were some tax account which you can post the tax, but the number of the account is hard-coded. In case you want more account, it's not possible without customization, without X++ code change. And the tax code and the relationship between tax code and ledger posting group is one-to-one relationship. And if you look at the GTE, firstly, the number of the account is configurable, depends on the posting profile you define under the tax component, and also the relationship between tax component and the account group is one-to-many. So you can define these lookups under the component. So you can have multiple posting accounts group attached to this component. For example, in this configuration, we say we configured the accounting logic like this. We say GST will have multiple set of the account, tax account, per each GST registration number. So that means for a company, if you have multiple GST registration number, you want to use different set of accounts. Set of accounts means tax recoverable account, tax payable accounts for different for different GST registration. So it is one-to-many relationship, which resulting, you don't have to maintain many tax code like you did in the older tax engine. Yeah, and there is another part is about the tax posting logic, and of course in the older tax engine, the posting logic is hard coded. And in the GTE, we have posting profile. You can configure the posting logic just like a formula, like I showed here. Okay, so that's the difference between the old tax engine and GTE in this three functional area. And then this is data flow. So first concept I want to highlight here is the source document. So source document, this rectangle. So source document means that any transaction which is taxable from tax perspective, like sales order, like vendor invoice, like purchase order, right? And in the middle, this we have from GT perspective, we wrap the concept called taxable document. So it's a data model. It's a data model. It's the abstraction of the source document. So we have sales order, we have purchase order. There's different field for purchase order and sales order, but from tax perspective, the conceptually they are the same, right? There are net amount. In India, we have assessable value, we have quantity, we have ship from, ship to country. So all this stuff are common from tax perspective for all these source documents. So that's the reason we have a concept called taxable document. This is abstraction of all the source document. And it is also an input for tax document. Tax document is a place for you to maintain the tax logic, including tax calculation, tax applicability, and tax calculation. And in order to get the value from the source document in FinOps, you need to have a model mapping to get the value from the source document, like sales order, like vendor invoice, to map the value into the taxable document we defined in the configuration. And we have this value, then we can use this value to execute the logic you define in the tax document for applicability, for calculation, for posting. And then in the end, all the result will be persisted into tax trends table, and later on it will be used in reporting and inquiries. So that's the data flow. So you create a sales order, system GTE will execute the model mapping to get the value from sales order map to taxable document, and then tax document will use the data you have in the taxable document to do the applicability calculation and posting, and then the result will be in the same table as you have in the old tax engine, and then for the reporting inquiry. So this one and is for me to further explain the concept to you. as I said, for sales order, right? We have customer, we have item, we have in the header we have customer and several other fields which actually are not relevant to tax. And we have item in India, we have HSN, SAC, we have accessible value, we have quantity, warehouse. So a lot of stuff, but here I only list the field which are needed for tax applicability, for tax calculation, for tax posting. And of course, we have purchase order, which have similar field as I listed in the sales order part, and also for general journal. So all these are taxable document, source document, right? And on the right side, it is a physical structure of taxable document. So firstly, we have data model. So data model is a tree structure with header, with line, and with several fields we think is relevant. We think are relevant for tax. We have customer, we have accessible value, we have is interstate, we have miscellaneous charge. So these are all the fields which we think are relevant to tax. And then we have model mapping for each of the source document type, like sales order, purchase order. So within the model mapping, we maintain some metadata between the field you have in the FinOps, in the sales order, in the purchase order, and the field you define in the customer. So you can imagine there is some mapping between the sales order customer and the data model header customer, and also you have mapping for sales order line accessible value and data model lines accessible value. So this is a model mapping. And then we have several other data model, which we call it a reference model, which is used for tax setup. I will explain it in detail later. So in the end, we have this model mapping, and then we have engine to execute the logic you define in this taxable document. When you create a sales order, so the engine will read the model mapping you define here and fetch the value from the sales order customer and set this value to data model header customer. So that is a logic. And in the end, from GTE perspective, you will have a taxable document with a data model with all the real data the GTE get from the source document, like sales order, right? So like what I shown here, we have customer name, IMMF 0001. We have sales direction, we have HSN, we have accessible value. So all these value are get from the real source document by model mapping. So we have all this data, then GTE will feed this data into the text document to execute the logic you define in the text document for that 4 area, tax applicability, calculation, and posting. So that is a general data flow. Before I move on, I will switch to the to FinOps to show you some concept. So we have this electronic reporting workspace, and then we have this tax configuration. So physically, we have this taxable document, and you can have multiple tax documents. So we have this global taxable document where we maintain the taxable field, right? Like ship from country, ship to country, which we believe is common but across the country. And then we derived Indian specific taxable document where we maintain some Indian specific field. So let's open the designer of the taxable document. Firstly, you notice that it is a tree structure. We have header, and on the header we have several fields, which is in the header level, like a customer account, like ledger currency, and then we have line. So you can see we have several fields you have in the line, right? We have account type, accounting code. We have accessible value, which is Indian specific field, and we have we have HSN code, which is also Indian field. Is SEZ party. So that is abstraction, as I mentioned, to the source document, which is taxable. And then, as I said, there were multiple data model. So this is one of the data model. On the top, if you switch to the reference model, so now we are in the taxable document. If you switch to reference model, you can see there is a multiple other data model. The structure is the same. It's also a tree structure. So we have city, then we have city and city. So why we need to have so many additional model, and we call it reference model, because sometimes, for example, let me go to here. So for example, we have a reference model called HSN. Why we need this additional data model? Because HSN is, we also have a field in the data model in the taxable document and in the line HSN code. Yeah, we have a HSN code defined in the taxable document, and you know it will be used as an applicability rule, applicability lookup column in the tax document, which for user to select the HSN to determine the appropriate tax rate in the tax setup. But we don't expect user. So in the tax setup, we have here. As you can see in the rate table for CGST, we have a column called HSN code. This field is coming from the data model, is coming from the taxable document. So why we need a reference model? Because we don't expect user to enter the HSN code manually. Instead, we want a user to be able to select the existing HSN code is defined in the financial operation. So that's the reason we need a reference model to get the value, to get the list of these HSN code from financial operation. So what you should do is we define a reference model. If I go here, we define a reference model. It is a data model abstract the HSN master. So we have HSN, we have a field called HSN code. You can add more field here. And then you can associate the HSN code. You can associate the reference model, this HSN code, which is a reference model, to this model field. So you will be able to select in the text setup instead of menu input this long number. Okay, so that is the purpose of having reference model. And of course, one last part is model mapping. So we have data model, we have model mapping, and we have multiple data model, as I already explained. If you click the map model to data source, you can see we have a lot of model mapping because we have many source documents like purchase order, sales order. So for example, this is customer invoice, it's free tax invoice. So if you click the designer, so on the left side, it is a data source type. So you can drag, you can add a data source from the financial operation. It can be a class, can be a enumeration table, records table, but mostly for our tax engine, we use a special data source, which we call it taxable document source. So you can add this data source. I don't want to add it because I already have it. So if you click add button, system will add a new data source in the middle of the screen. So this is all the available data source for you to do the mapping. So we already have a data source with type taxable document source. So this is the one. Here are all the available field for you to do the mapping. So on the right side is the data model. So this is a taxable document. So you can see how it is mapped. For now, this customer account in the data model is mapped to this data source header customer account. Actually, it is this one. So if you want to do additional mapping, you can select this. You can select the field in the middle and then select this one. If the value of these two fields are the same, so for export order is enum, and for excise vendor type is also enumeration value, then you can bind them. Or you can click edit button to write some formula to do the conversion. You can refer to electronic reporting, this docs for detail, because GTE is built on top of the GER framework, especially from taxable document model perspective. Okay, so I will come back to the tax document later. So let me switch back to the slides. So then we just finished the taxable document, the idea of taxable document, and then I want to discuss about the tax document. So as I mentioned, tax document is a place for you to maintain the real tax logic. Real tax logic means tax applicability, calculation, posting. So I draw this flow chart. It looks a little bit complex because it's really flexible. Depends on how you want to do the configuration. So I categorize the flow chart into several parts. One is general, and we have several change you might need to done in the taxable document, and all the rest 4 area is extension you have done in the tax document. So the scenario is you want to add a new tax component. What should you consider, and what you should do in order to add a new tax component? So firstly, you should decide whether this new tax component require new model field. If you need a new model field, so you need to do the extension for the taxable document, because as I explained, taxable document is abstraction of the source document, and it is input for tax document. So suppose that you wanna add a new component, tax component, maybe just like additional sales, and you want additional sales. The applicability logic for additional sales is the item ID, and you realize that in the current taxable document there is no field called item ID. In that case, you have to extend the taxable document to adding this field and do the mapping. So what you need to do to extend the taxable document? So the first thing is you need to extend the taxable document. So you cannot change the taxable document released by Microsoft. And then you need to add a new field. Suppose it is item ID. And then you need to decide, okay, whether this new field will be used in tax setup, and it requires drop-down list. As I explained, so for item ID, I think it will be used for applicability, and it will be used in the tax setup. And you also want the user to be able to pick up the item ID user defined in the finance and operation system. So definitely you need to add a reference model, and then you need to attach the reference model to the new field. Then basically that's all for the change required in the taxable document. So in case the new tax component require a new field, which is only for calculation and posting purpose, then you don't need to add any reference model. You can skip this part. So this is a change for taxable document. In case your scenario, your new tax component do not require any new field, you can skip the change for taxable document. You can jump to the tax document part. So you should extend the tax document, and you need to, if you change the data model by adding new field, you need to make sure in your extended tax document, you should change the data model to the extended taxable document, because by default, the tax document will use the Microsoft data model. If not, I mean, if you did not extend the taxable document, you can jump to adding new tax type if it's a new tax type. Suppose, but of course you can say, well, the tax component I'm going to add is actually part of the GST, so you can skip this part. You can add the tax component directly. So you have the tax component. Then you need to decide what kind of tax measure you want to have. The tax measure means base amount, tax rate. So, and the load on inventory percentage, reverse charge percentage. So these are the tax measure which are actually the building block for calculation and posting. So, but of course, you need to first check whether the measure you want already existed. For most of case, I think there are the measure you needed. So in that case, you can just select the tax measure. If not, you need to add a new tax measure. And then, so you have the tax component, you have all the measure. Then the next thing you need to do is you need to decide how the tax component will be determined. I'm talking about applicability. So whether it should be determined dynamically or statically. If it is not dynamically, you can define the lookup column with source type as if it need to be decided by the dynamically, which means it rely on the data you define in a finance and operation system, like item ID, like HSN code. You should define the lookup column with source type as user data. And if not, that means that the applicability logic is static, which like intrastate, interstate. It's the same for all the customer. So you can configure such logic into the configuration. Either you can use the condition or use a lookup with source type as configuration. Okay. And then you define the lookup for tax rate, load on inventory. So applicability, there are two parts. One is on the tax component level. Another is rate lookup. So you probably need to define the logic, how you want to determine the tax rate, and probably load on inventory if you have this logic. So that's part of the applicability. And then you need to create a formula to handle the tax calculation. So you need to add a tax formula in tax component. And probably if there is different formula for different transaction, then you can define the condition for the formula. For example, you have a tax component which need to handle the load on inventory scenario. And definitely this formula is only applicable for purchase transaction. So you added this formula to handle the load on inventory, or in an older tax engine is non-deductible tax. You probably need to add a condition to restrict this formula only for purchase transaction instead of be applied to all the transaction. So you need to decide whether you need to add a condition for it. And in case for price include tax transaction, if the tax of this tax component is part of the price, probably you need to change the formula in the line. And then, so that's all the things you need to do for the calculation. And then it's posting. So you need to add a posting profile and to decide how you want to post the tax measure. The first thing you need to check whether you can reuse existing account. So in the GST configuration, standard GST configuration, there is a lot of account like tax recoverable, tax payable. Probably you can reuse this account. If not, like I know in India we have SEZ scenario which require tax refundable account. In that case, you need to add a new account. And you have the account, then you can configure the posting logic. So again, if this posting is applicable, is for a certain transaction, you should define a condition to make sure that this posting logic is only for certain transaction instead of applying to all kind of transaction. So that's just a whole picture, the flow chart. It looks complex, but on this Friday session, I will show you how to add a new component. So actually, in reality, you don't need to consider so much. Normally, it's very straightforward, but this flowchart just give you an idea how flexibility it can be. Okay, so then let's go to the configuration. So in today's session, I'm going to show you a very simple extension scenario. Let me close the page. So after you import the configuration, so you will have this 3 configuration file, which are shipped by Microsoft. You cannot change it actually. So in your environment, you will notice that you cannot activate this configuration provider, because in my side it is the internal environment. I can activate this one. So what you should do is you should add a configuration provider for yourself. You click save. So you can see we have one more configuration provider. So this is actually kind of workspace for you to make configuration change. So I activate it. Yeah, I activate this one. And then I go to task configuration. What I want to show you is for the standard configuration, you know, for transfer order in Indian, GST is applicable only for interstate transfer order. If you create an intrastate transfer order, you will notice that there is no any GST component. But actually, it is not correct for some customer in case, you know, if the customer have multiple GST registration number in one state, even the intrastate transfer order is taxable. So it is expected that there are both CGST and SGST for such intrastate transfer order. Okay, so basically we need to compare the ship from warehouse GST registration number and the ship to warehouse GST registration number. So since I know that all these 2 fields are already exist in the taxable document, so I don't need to extend the data model, I mean the taxable document. Instead, I just need to extend the tax document. So I click create a configuration. Okay, change. Okay, I think there's some probably let me double check. I think there's some issue. Let me check the Microsoft one. Okay, so I think maybe there's some issue here, but it's not an issue. So I will show you in the standard in so basically for you to change the configuration, you have to you have to create it like this, Control and choose this option. So you should derive the task configuration by using this option. And after you create a configuration, what you need to do is you just open the designer to make the change. Before I open the designer, I want to show you something. We have if you go to configurations and click user parameter, recently we have some enhancement in 10.0.2. You can enable this advanced formula editor. And by doing this, if you open the designer, so as I said, the scenario I'm trying to extend is I want to change to make the CGST and SGST applicable for intrastate transfer order in case the GST registration number between the ship from warehouse are different from the ship to warehouse. So what I need to do is, as you know, the applicability are controlled by the condition together with the lookup. You have yes, I think, yeah, you have lookup here. So what I want to change is the condition here. So I click this pencil button. This is a new advanced editor, so it will take some time to load this new control. So let's first check the lookup. First check the condition we have in the standard configuration. So basically the logic means CGST is applicable in case the taxable document type is not intrastate, it's not an inventory transfer order received, inventory transfer shipment, inventory transfer order, and there must be HSN code and SAC code. So that is logic. So definitely, if it's definitely for transfer order, CGST and CGST will not be applicable. So let me check the environment. I think, yeah, I'm sorry. I think there is some browser issue. Wait a second. I have to change another browser. Let me try. Let me try more with this provider. Okay, maybe my it's not an Edge browser. So anyway, let's use this one to continue the demo. So yeah, so you create a text document for Contoso and give it a description. So you have a new derived text document. So you click, sorry, just make sure that I have enabled enabled advanced formula editor. And then I click designer. And I go to CGST. I click the condition. Okay, so as I already explained, the logic means basically it means CGST is not applicable for transfer order. So what we want to make it applicable even for transfer order in case GAT registration number are different between the ship from warehouse and ship to warehouse. So what should I do? I should say, okay, I put a or condition here, and so basically like this. So basically this means, okay, in case at CGST will be applicable, either it is not a transfer order or GST registration number. So this is a ship from warehouse's GST registration number is different from party GST registration number. For transfer order, for any transfer order. So that's the reason I put a or operator here. Okay, so let me put the yeah, so logic is clear. So there are two possible situations. One is it's not a transfer order, or it is a transfer order, and the ship from GST registration number is different from the ship to's warehouse GST registration number. Then CGST will still be applicable. So we save it. Okay, no error, and you can even test it. So let's say the inventory, the taxable document type is invent transfer order, and then GST registration number is 123. And for the ship to the GST registration number of ship to warehouse is also 123, and we give it this HSN code. I click OK. You can see the result is 0, which means in this case GST is not applicable. So it is correct, right? It is intrastate inventory transfer order, and the GST registration number are the same. So let's do one more testing. And so now I put a different GST registration number. So give it ABC. So now I'm creating a transfer order with different GST registration number. So according to our intention, it should be applicable. So let's click OK. So as you can see, the result is 1. So that means now by changing this applicability logic, if you create a transfer order and make sure that the GST registration number for this ship from ship to warehouse are different, then you will be able to see GST. So of course you can do the same for SGST to apply the same the logic. So after you've done that, you click the save. Then you have to complete the change. Just give it a description. Enable interstate order. Click OK. So basically, the whole flow is complex. but actually, if you just want to change part of the logic, it's not that complex. And we still have some minutes, have some time. Let me open the designer. So I just want to explain you. Okay, so applicability, as I mentioned in the previous flow chart. So in the text type, we have condition for you to maintain the static applicability rule. And also, we have lookups. So this is also static. Why? It's because you maintain the applicability rule in the configuration, which means it can be shared for all the environments. You don't rely on any data you define in the financial operation. So pay attention to the source type. It is configuration, which means you maintain the applicability rule in the configuration file. Actually, there is another option. If you check the SAS. So as you can see, the SAS, the source type is user data. So user data, there's no data you maintain in the configuration because the SAS applicability rule is maintained in the finance and operation. It's not in the designer. So if you go to the tax setup, if you click setup, if now I select SAS, you will notice that there is one more tab here called applicability. So if you check the structure, there are two columns, HSN and SAC. It is defined in the configuration. And then, because it's the source type is user data, you can add the condition here. So for example, I can say for SAS, it's applicable only for this specific HSN code. So that's the difference between user data and configuration. Okay, so basically, yeah. So I just what I want to emphasize is 2 points. One is we have applicability logic in the text type level and the text component level, and in both sides you can do it in the condition by condition or by the lookup. And there are two types of lookups. One is configuration, another is user data. Okay. And for formula, of course, you can maintain several formula, and you can define the condition for formula which is applicable for certain transaction. So for example, for this base amount, of course, it's a generic formula which apply to all the transaction. But if you take a look at this load on inventory, there's some formula because it's only applicable for tax direction as sales tax receivable. Basically, it's only for purchase transaction. So that is logic. And of course, you can do the same for posting profile. Okay, so I think that's basically what I want to share today. And on this Friday, I will share two more scenarios to create a new text component, and also some more complex scenario as regards changing the posting profile and applicability. Thank you. So back to Janice.
All right. Thank you, Richard. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to take a brief moment here and bring your attention to a link that I posted in the Q&A panel. That's a link to a short survey for this web conference, and we ask that you please take a moment before logging out to access it. We hope that you found today's information helpful, and if you enjoyed today's web conference, have feedback on how we can provide you with a better event, or you'd like to submit topics for future web conferences, this is your chance to let us know. We do appreciate the time you take to do this, and thank you for your support. And that is going to conclude today's web conference. The recording and a copy of the presentation deck will be available within 5 business days. Please look for an email from Learning Media that will include details on how to access those. I'd like to extend a big thank you to our presenters, Richard and Prabhat, and thank you, audience, for logging in and joining us today.